So Disney just had their sales call again, very recently for was it the end of year last year?
Yeah, little end of their quarter. I guess Disney's
End of
fiscal year
Q4. Yeah.
runs differently than everybody else because they're special.
Mm. But they have announced quite a few things. I think we talked a little bit about some of this during the W's and L's segment
Mm-hmm.
last week. But amongst some of the announcements that they've made as far as new projects coming out, they've mostly announced the fact that 7,000 layoffs, $5 billion in cut costs,
Shit.
including a lot of it being content
It was like
creation
three,
costs.
yeah, 3 million of that is content creation costs. So they like, so where's the other? Where would the other 2.5 billion be coming from? Is that like executive positions, executive salaries that they're cutting?
Probably
They're
not.
already laying off 7,000 people,
Yeah.
and they're allocating 3 million of the or is it it's 5 billion?
I think it's 5 billion.
5 billion, yeah. So $3 of the $5 billion that they're cutting is coming from entertainment. That still leaves $2.5 billion. That sounds like some executive salaries are going bye bye. Oh, Miss Kennedy.
We'll see.
Probably.
I think it's
Probably.
amazing to note that, Iger coming back was supposed to be the sign of everything's supposed to be good now. But
Well, what it tells me is that maybe Chapek, in the short stint that he was there, didn't, especially when you talk about how he was hiding the financials and things like that, and then how he structured Disney going through his newly minted distribution center that he had set up for all of the Disney content that Kareem Daniels was running. That stuff obviously wasn't all that great. But everything that, had led Disney to this point to where, they're really not growing at the rate that they need to be. They're no longer catching people, not as a brand. We're not even just talking, Marvel specifically, like Disney Animation, Pixar, all of those divisions are down. Star Wars, they're down. So for them to have gotten to this point, it really wasn't all Chapek, right? Iger has a role in this, and him coming back and being the guy, wearing the Superman cape wasn't enough to skirt some of the very big financial liabilities that Disney had. So in that, he had to make some tough choices. Another thing that's looming over all of this is, the guys lurking over in the corner there, Nelson Peltz and Ike Perlmutter, trying to gain control of all of this stuff again. And so I do think a lot of what we saw coming from Disney out of this call was in response to that, because they didn't go out of their way to acknowledge the proxy fight. And I believe that was because, as some guys have already reported, Pro and Valiant Renegade, that some of the cuts and the acquiescence of Iger in this call was at the behest of Peltz in some sort of, all right, look, we'll pull out on the proxy war, but this is what we want to see. We want to see Disney be more financially fit first and foremost. A lot of people had their speculation about that, saying that Peltz and Perlmutter, they're fighting the woke. They're going to get all the representation stuff out. And they that still might be their aim, to be honest with you. I have no clue. But it seems that first and foremost, beyond any type of culture war, agenda, battles we're going to fight here, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that Disney is able to bring people in and be financially fit. What I'm not really understanding is, it didn't seem as though Iger had plans for the biggest problem children in all of this, which is what's supposed to be your front leaders in Lucasfilm and the MCU, and they're sputtering right now. What they hit us with was a lot of animation stuff that they know is probably going to hit, right? Yeah. Just kind of historically, Toy Story does very well, Moana does very well. What were the other ones? Name one.
Up sequel, I think.
Up 2, okay.
Yep.
Frozen. This was like Frozen 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they know that those are And I think Moana was in there too, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Moana was a hit for them. Frozen obviously is a hit. Toy Story was supposed to have been wrapped up. They didn't want to do this. They didn't. Like, if you saw the last Toy Story, they wrapped up. They have wrapped up Andy's arc. They wrapped up Woody's arc. They tried to spin off Buzz. It didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work. So dipping back into this Toy Story well could be dangerous. Right? What if the movie tanks? What can you do to push the nostalgia to get that crowd, that 90s crowd, back to see another Toy Story movie? I'm not saying it's not possible, because they got people back out to see Toy Story 4. Yeah. But it's going to be interesting, because they're going to have to stretch that creative thread even further, which every time you do that, it devalues the last goodbye you just told. Right? Like, I'm not even thinking about Toy Story 3 with what was it, Lazo the bear, where they got sent to the daycare. I'm not even thinking about that shit anymore. Yeah. That felt like a wrap up where Andy gave all his toys to that little girl. I thought, okay, that's it. It's over.
Yep.
I'm not that's nowhere in my purview now, because we had a whole nother goodbye in Toy Story 4, and now we're going to have another one in Toy Story 5. So you are degrading the amount of heartstring tug or nostalgia that you have towards that kind of stuff every time you try to redo it.
And it makes it not special when you go back and see it the fifth time.
They got much more runway with stuff like Up and Moana, which is really, when you talk about Pixar or Disney animation, those are two of the golden nuggets that you've gotten out of this long run of kind of lackluster stuff coming out of those studios. Mm-hmm. Moana is very popular. Frozen, honestly, is a franchise that has stood the test of time too. But I just don't know. I mean, at a point in time, Disney animation was driving Disney, so I don't want to say that it can't get them back in a more financially fit place. I just think that the Star Wars stuff and the MCU stuff has to come along with it.
Yeah.
It can't just be, oh, well, we got a couple hits. Because, I mean, that's what you've had essentially the last 5-6 years, has been a couple animation hits here and there, a couple middling MCU projects that people kind of like, but you haven't had a smash. There has not been a smash Marvel hit project. I would say maybe WandaVision or No Way Home, but we already know. Sorry. Yeah. Does that speak to your financial fitness if you can hit, let's say, Toy Story, Moana, and Frozen all exceed expectations, but the rest of what they presented doesn't really do much, and you're still getting these middling results from your MCU projects, and you're still struggling to make Star Wars movies?
No, you can't do that.
I don't think you look any better than you do currently. So it's interesting. I think we got a lot of what we expected to get out of the call. The interesting thing was, I think the more telling thing is that Peltz and, what is it, Trian, his company, investment company, they pulled out of the proxy fight. So that tells me some kind of deal was made. Disney made the appropriate cuts. They backed out of the proxy stuff, but he's still there. He still has like $1 billion invested in Disney.
I guess they're also reorganizing into 3 segments.
Yeah, that was the other thing.
So entertainment, Disney Plus and content operations, ESPN, TV network and ESPN Plus, and parks, experiences, and products.
So with them restructuring the entertainment division to include everything, right? So everything entertainment, whether it's Disney Plus, Lucasfilm, Marvel, animation, Pixar, whatever. What everything is under entertainment. That's a more reasonable way of kind of hiding some of your losses.
Oh yeah.
Right? But it's another way of kind of bolstering your wins as well. When you have $1 billion film, that's a win for the entertainment group as a whole, as opposed to just one creative team getting credit for that $1 billion film, but then you see you're hemorrhaging everywhere else. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a little bit too easy to pinpoint where the losses are when your film division is divvied up that greatly.
Yeah.
It also establishes that they're probably not going to end up selling off ESPN, at least not no time soon. Which I never really, I don't know if I ever got behind them doing that completely, because, man, 20 million eyeballs on 4 different channels every Saturday afternoon for 15 straight weeks sounds pretty damn lucrative to me.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they would ever. Not to mention, you're getting 2 more days during the week in the fall for football, for NFL, and then college basketball as well. Not as lucrative as college football, but still a very millions of eyeballs every single time you appear. So as long as they still have, contracts with some of the biggest conferences in the sport, they'll never want to give that up.
Yeah.
Never want to give that up. That's built-in advertising right there that you can essentially pay yourself for. Plus, the thing with Disney, with ESPN specifically, it's what drives their linear pricing. So let's rewind about 6 years or so when Marcus used to work for a communications company, for a cable company. Disney is notorious about including ESPN into their linear packages, not necessarily to you, the end user customer, but to the people who are sourcing ESPN. So your Dish, Direct, Spectrum, Cox, Comcast, all of that. Mm-hmm. So they're leasing their channels back to the cable companies, but they say you can't have Freeform, Disney, ABC, and whatever else. I think it used to be CNN. You can't have any of those without also buying ESPN. By the way, ESPN is more expensive than all of them. Right? So, like, let's say the cable company pays $20 per customer for a Disney license for all those channels. $9 of that is probably ESPN. And then the rest of the channels, and they've got like 10 channels in total. But the rest of those just are like 50 cents per. And so then that essentially makes your cable a little bit more expensive, because the cable company tries to put most of that cost off onto you. But we don't have to dig into that. The point is, ESPN is a money driver for them, because it allows for their other linear networks to be included automatically. So any basic cable package you get in America is going to include ABC, Disney, Freeform, and ESPN.
I would have to assume that the demand for ESPN is what causes it to be so much higher. Mm-hmm. No? Okay.
They know people want it.
Okay. Fair. Especially
here in North America. People love North American sports, baseball, football, soccer. ABC, ESPN is comprised of all of those. And they have lucrative deals with a lot of those sports leagues. So as long as that is still the case, I mean, they run the college football playoff, right? So we're talking about some of the most watched football games all year, and ESPN is the arbiter of them. They choose who plays in them. Yep. So it's, unless they were really in dire straits, like about to go belly up, it's probably never going to be an option to sell it outright to another company. Mm-hmm. They'll spin it off and let it become its own entity before they allow someone else to just take it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Any other thoughts on the Disney call at all?
That's it, man. Let's see what they do. Let's see what the plan is, because, I mean, this will get them in better financial shape in the short term. In the long term, if it's not followed by quality content, none of this is going to matter. And honestly, I think that is step 2 for Peltz and Perlmutter. That's something we can expand on a little bit right now, is the fight between those two. So the Peltz thing makes sense because he's got $1 billion invested, and he obviously doesn't agree with some of the social messaging. But Perlmutter is interesting because I kind of just feel like Peltz found a friend on the Disney board. I don't even know if he's necessarily working for Ike Perlmutter in the way that Perlmutter thinks or would like. I think he's a means to an end. Because if you think about some of the stuff we've heard about Ike Perlmutter, Ike Perlmutter did keep Marvel alive for many years, through their dark ages, right? Blade, that early version of Marvel films, that was Perlmutter. But Perlmutter was in the way of Black Panther. I'm not a huge fan of Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, but he was also in the middle of that when that film made $1 billion. You're talking about he would have given up a $2 billion plus, almost $2.5 billion worth of would have been never have happened for the franchise had Ike Perlmutter had his way. So it's like we kind of giving and taking. I'm not in love with the direction that Disney is going in right now. I'm not arguing that Black Panther or Captain Marvel shouldn't have been made, though. That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sounds ridiculous. Maybe Captain Marvel shouldn't have been made the way it was made. Maybe it shouldn't have been done the way it was storyline wise, but I don't think that disqualifies it from being made. Right? It was obviously successful enough to be made.
Yeah.
And if that was a major point of contention for somebody like Ike Perlmutter, I don't know if that's necessarily, even for Nelson Peltz looking at it objectively, I don't think he looks at that and is like, yeah, I just want to hand all this back over to Ike. I think Ike is a means to an end for him to gain more control in Disney ultimately, so he can kind of exert what he wants to do.
Makes sense.
No. Tell us what you thought about the Disney investor call and all of the results, all of the news that we got coming out of it. Is Disney still in trouble with Ike Perlmutter and Nelson Peltz? Where do you think they're going to be doing most of these 7,000 cuts? And what is not going to be on the slate? If we're cutting $3 billion from the content creation slate, what is getting axed? Give us your thoughts please. Give us your thoughts in the comment below. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and come back next week for more content.
Absolutely, and make sure you check out our most recent Disney video where we discussed the closing of Splash Mountain. So make sure you definitely check out that video, and then also make sure you subscribe anytime we get any news about Disney. We'll be sure to clue you in.